Hello everyone, welcome back. Before we begin tonight's story, I want to take a moment to talk to you directly. If you want the full continuation of these stories, more uncensored 18+ ancient BL content, extended scenes, and unlimited royal forbidden romance, you can join us on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. As you know, YouTube does not allow us to show or monetize everything freely here, so the deeper, darker, and much more intense versions of these stories are waiting for you there. You can find the link in the description and in the pinned comment. I can't wait to see you there. Now, take a deep breath, let the modern world fade away. Imagine the scent of burning sandalwood, the sound of heavy rain striking glazed clay tiles, and the towering red walls of an ancient imperial palace. A place where power is everything, where one wrong word can cost you your life, and where love is the most dangerous secret of all. Our story begins in the aftermath of a brutal war. The great Yan Empire had swallowed the neighboring kingdom of Zhao, leaving it in ashes. To ensure the absolute submission of the defeated kingdom, the Yan Emperor demanded a hostage. He didn't ask for gold, he asked for a person. Lin Xuan was the Crown Prince of Zhao. He was 22 years old, known across the lands for his brilliant mind, his unmatched skill with a sword, and a pride that could not be broken. But now, his kingdom was gone. His armies were shattered, and to save the remaining innocent lives of his people, Lin Xuan had to surrender himself to the enemy. He was brought to the Yan capital in chains. I want you to picture this moment. It is the middle of a freezing autumn rainstorm. The sky is the color of bruised iron. Lin Xuan is forced to his knees in the center of the vast white marble courtyard of the Yan imperial palace. His once glorious white silk robes are soaked and stained with mud. His hands are bound. The rain is plastering his dark hair to his pale, beautiful face. The palace guards are shouting at him to bow his head to the steps of the throne room. But Lin Xuan refuses. He stays on his knees, shivering, bleeding, but his chin is tilted up. His dark, piercing eyes stare straight ahead, defying the entire empire. Then, the heavy wooden doors of the great hall open. A figure steps out onto the covered veranda. The guards immediately drop to their faces in the puddles, terrified. It was Yan Wuchen, the Crown Prince of the Yan Empire. If Lin Xuan was fire and pride, Yan Wuchen was ice and shadows. Wuchen was a man of terrifying reputation. He was known as the cold Jade Prince. He was devastatingly handsome, with sharp, aristocratic features, eyes as dark as an abyss, and a heart that people said was made of frost. He wore heavy robes of black and gold, embroidered with the imperial dragon. Wuchen didn't say a word. He just walked down the marble steps, a servant holding a massive oiled paper umbrella over his head. He stopped right in front of Lin Xuan. For a long time, the only sound was the rain hitting the umbrella. Lin Xuan looked up, his breathing shallow, meeting the gaze of the man who had ordered the destruction of his home. There was so much hatred in Xuan's chest, so much anger. Wuchen looked down at him. His expression was completely unreadable. Then, very slowly, Wuchen reached out his hand. He didn't draw a sword, he didn't strike him. Instead, he took the umbrella from his servant's hands and tilted it forward, shielding Lin Xuan from the freezing rain. The gesture was so unexpected, it made Lin Xuan freeze. Wuchen leaned down, just a little. His voice was low, smooth, and dangerously calm. It was a voice that commanded absolute obedience. "A proud spine is a dangerous thing in my palace, Prince Lin," Wuchen whispered, his breath barely brushing Xuan's wet cheek. "If you do not learn to bend, they will snap you in half." Lin Xuan's jaw tightened. "Then let them try," he spat back, his voice hoarse but steady. A tiny, almost imperceptible smirk tugged at the corner of Wuchen's mouth. It was a look of dangerous curiosity. "We shall see," Wuchen murmured. He stood up, dropped the umbrella into the mud next to Lin Xuan, and walked away, leaving Xuan in the cold, staring at the back of the man who held his life, and his fate, in his hands. For the first few months, Lin Xuan's life in the palace was a gilded cage. He was given a secluded pavilion to live in. He wasn't locked in a dungeon, but he was surrounded by imperial guards at all times. He was an eagle trapped in a sparrow's cage. But what drove Lin Xuan crazy wasn't the isolation. It was Yan Wuchen. The Crown Prince had assigned himself as Lin Xuan's supervisor, and Wuchen seemed to take a sadistic pleasure in testing Lin Xuan's limits. He would summon Xuan at all hours of the day. Sometimes it was to pour his tea while Wuchen read court documents. Sometimes it was just to stand in the corner of the room in absolute silence. It was a psychological game. Wuchen was trying to strip away Xuan's pride, to see what was underneath, but Xuan refused to break. One afternoon, the tension between them finally boiled over. Wuchen had summoned Lin Xuan to the private royal training grounds. It was a beautiful courtyard surrounded by bamboo, the ground covered in soft sand. Wuchen was dressed lightly, in a loose dark silk tunic, practicing his sword forms. His movements were deadly, precise, and mesmerizing to watch. When Xuan arrived, Wuchen didn't even look at him. He just threw a wooden training sword at Xuan's feet. "Pick it up," Wuchen ordered, not breaking his stance. Xuan looked at the wooden sword. "I am a prisoner, Your Highness, not your sparring partner." Wuchen stopped. He turned around, his dark eyes locking onto Xuan. "Are you afraid, Prince Lin, or have you forgotten how to hold a sword now that your kingdom is dust?" The insult hit exactly where it was meant to. Lin Xuan's eyes flashed with fury. He kicked the wooden sword up into his hand, gripping the hilt so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Do not insult my kingdom," Xuan warned, his voice dropping an octave. "Then defend it," Wuchen challenged softly. Xuan lunged. The clash of the wooden swords echoed like thunder through the bamboo grove. It wasn't just a sparring match, it was a release of months of pent-up anger, frustration, and undeniable tension. They moved like two wolves circling each other. Xuan was incredibly fast, his strikes full of raw emotion. But Wuchen was an immovable mountain. He parried every blow, his eyes never leaving Xuan's face. They fought until their breath was heavy, until sweat shone on their skin. The air between them grew thick, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with hatred. Suddenly, Wuchen stepped inside Xuan's guard. He twisted his wrist, disarming Xuan in a heartbeat, and shoved him hard against one of the massive wooden pillars holding up the courtyard roof. Xuan gasped as his back hit the wood. Before he could react, Wuchen was there. Wuchen pinned Xuan's wrists above his head with one hand, his body pressing flush against Xuan's. The wooden sword was discarded in the sand. Suddenly, the vast courtyard felt suffocatingly small. Xuan's chest heaved, brushing against Wuchen's with every desperate breath. He looked up, furious, ready to spit a curse, but the words died in his throat. Wuchen was looking at him differently. The cold, mocking mask was gone. In its place was something raw, something hungry. Wuchen's face was inches from Xuan's. Xuan could feel the heat radiating from the Crown Prince's body. He could smell the faint scent of sweat, pine needles, and expensive incense. Wuchen's dark eyes dropped, just for a split second, to Lin Xuan's parted lips. The silence was deafening. The only sound was the rustling of the bamboo leaves and their ragged breathing. Xuan's heart was hammering so violently against his ribs he was sure Wuch could feel it. He should have pushed him away. He should have yelled. But his body betrayed him. He stayed perfectly still, trapped in the magnetic pull of Wuchen's gaze. For a terrifying, agonizing moment, it felt like Wuchen was going to lean in. It felt like he was going to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. Then, slowly, Wuchen released Xuan's wrists. He took a step back, the cold mask slipping right back into place, though his breathing was still uneven. "Your footwork is sloppy," Wuchen said, his voice a little hoarse. He turned his back on Xuan and walked away. Lin Xuan slid down the pillar just a fraction, his legs suddenly weak. He pressed his hand over his racing heart, staring at the empty doorway Wuchen had just walked through. The hatred he had clung to so fiercely was suddenly feeling very, very complicated. And if you are enjoying this forbidden royal tension, let me pause for a quick reminder. The extended, uncensored 18+ continuation of this slow-burn romance is available right now on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. If you want the scenes where they stop holding back, where the tension finally snaps behind closed palace doors, you know where to go. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. Now, let's return to the imperial court. As autumn turned to winter, the atmosphere in the palace grew more treacherous. The Yan court was a nest of vipers. The nobles resented Lin Xuan's presence, seeing him as a threat, and they didn't understand why the Crown Prince kept a defeated enemy so close. During the winter solstice banquet, this hatred came out of the shadows. The grand hall was ablaze with thousands of candles. The tables were loaded with roasted meats, exotic fruits, and endless jars of sweet plum wine. Music played, dancers twirled in silk ribbons, but the undercurrent was toxic. Lin Xuan was forced to attend, seated at a small table near the back, a visible trophy of Yan's victory. He kept his eyes down, ignoring the sneers and whispered insults from the drunk nobles. But one minister, a fat, arrogant man named Lord Zhao, decided whispers weren't enough. Intoxicated and emboldened, he stood up and stumbled over to Xuan's table, holding his empty wine cup. "You," Lord Zhao barked, tossing the cup onto Xuan's table. It clattered loudly, drawing the attention of the surrounding nobles. "Pour my wine, defeated dog. Your hands are useless for holding a sword now anyway." The music slowly faded. The hall went uncomfortably quiet. Everyone watched. At the head of the room, sitting on his elevated platform, Crown Prince Wuchen stopped drinking. His dark eyes slowly shifted from the dancers to the back of the room. Lin Xuan stared at the empty cup. His pride warred with his survival instinct. If he reacted, he could be executed for striking a Yan official. If he poured it, he was accepting the humiliation. Slowly, his jaw clenched. He reached out to take the wine jug. Crash. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the massive hall like a gunshot. Everyone jumped. They looked toward the front. Yan Wuchen had thrown his own jade wine cup directly at the marble floor. It was smashed into 100 pieces. The entire banquet hall held its breath. Lord Zhao turned pale, immediately dropping to his knees, not knowing what he had done wrong, but terrified of the Crown Prince's legendary temper. Wuchen didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. When he spoke, it was a quiet, lethal drawl that carried to every corner of the room. Lord Zhao, Wuchen said softly, it seems the wine has made you blind. You ask a royal prince to pour your drink as if he were a common tavern servant. Your Highness, Lord Zhao stammered, trembling. He is a prisoner, a defeated. He is my guest, Wuchen cut him off. The words were quiet, but they hit like a physical blow. And he is under my protection. If you wish to disrespect something that belongs to me, Lord Zhao, you may offer me your hands as an apology. A collective gasp swept through the hall. Did the Crown Prince just say the hostage belonged to him? Did he just threaten to sever a minister's hands over an insult to an enemy prince? Lord Zhao began to kowtow so hard his forehead bled on the floor. Forgive me, Your Highness. Forgive me. Wuchen didn't look at the minister. He looked over the crowd, straight at Lin Xuan. Xuan was staring back at him, shock radiating through his entire body. Why? Why would Wuchen protect him in front of the entire court? Why paint a target on his own back for a hostage? Wuchen held Xuan's gaze for a long, heavy moment. Then, he waved his hand dismissively. Get him out of my sight. The banquet is over. That night, sleep would not come to Lin Xuan. He lay in his cold bed in the pavilion, staring at the ceiling. The way Wuchen had looked at him, the words under my protection, it made a warmth bloom in Xuan's chest that terrified him more than any sword ever had. He hated Yan Wuchen. He was supposed to hate him. But when he closed his eyes, all he could feel was the memory of Wuchen's body pressing him against that wooden pillar, the heat of his breath, the darkness of his eyes. Xuan threw off the covers. He needed air. He threw a dark cloak over his shoulders and slipped out of his pavilion. The palace was massive and mostly asleep, patrolled only by the night watch. Xuan knew the patrol's routes by now. He wandered the silent, snow-dusted corridors until he found himself near the Imperial Archives, a massive, multi-story library of scrolls and maps. He slipped inside. It was dark, lit only by moonlight filtering through the carved wooden windows. Xuan walked through the towering shelves, the smell of old paper and dust calming his racing mind. He turned a corner into the map room and froze. Someone was there. Sitting at a large oak table, illuminated by a single flickering candle, was Yan Wuchen. Wuchen had stripped off his heavy outer court robes. He wore only a soft white silk inner robe that hung slightly open at the collar, revealing the strong lines of his collarbone. He looked exhausted. The cold, unfeeling prince of the court was gone, replaced by a man rubbing his temples, surrounded by endless political reports. Xuan tried to step back, to leave before he was seen, but his boot scuffed against the floorboards. Wuchen's head snapped up. His hand instinctively went to a dagger on the table, but when he saw it was Lin Xuan standing in the shadows, his shoulders dropped. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The candlelight danced between them. Do you make a habit of haunting the palace like a ghost, Prince Lin? Wuchen asked, his voice low, rough with fatigue. Xuan stepped slightly into the light. I could not sleep. I didn't know you were here. Wuchen looked at him, really looked at him. Xuan was dressed in simple nightclothes, his hair unbound, falling softly over his shoulders. Without the armor of his pride and his court robes, Xuan looked breathtakingly vulnerable. Come here, Wuchen said softly. Xuan's heart did a strange, traitorous flutter. He hesitated, then walked slowly to the table, standing across from Wuchen. He glanced down at the map Wuchen was studying. It was a map of the borderlands, of Xuan's fallen kingdom. Why did you do it? Xuan asked quietly, unable to hold the question in anymore. At the banquet, you humiliated a powerful minister for me. You made the court suspect you. Wuchen leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes studying Xuan's face. Let them suspect. They are dogs fighting over scraps. I do not care what they think. But why? Xuan pressed, his voice breaking just a little. He leaned his hands on the table, leaning closer. You took everything from me. My home, my freedom. Why protect me now? What is this twisted game you are playing with me, Yan Wuchen? Hearing his actual name fall from Xuan's lips seemed to do something to Wuchen. The Crown Prince's eyes darkened. Wuchen stood up slowly. He walked around the table until he was standing right in front of Xuan. The candle flickered, casting long shadows against the bookshelves. You think this is a game? Wuchen murmured, taking a step closer. Xuan held his ground, though every nerve in his body was on fire. What else could it be? Wuchen reached up, his fingers, warm and slightly calloused from sword practice, gently brushed a stray lock of dark hair behind Xuan's ear. Xuan gasped softly at the contact. He shivered, but he didn't pull away. Since the day you knelt in the mud and refused to bow to me, Wuchen whispered, his thumb lightly tracing the line of Xuan's jaw, you have been a thorn in my mind. You are arrogant, you are stubborn, and you are the only real thing in this entire cursed palace. Xuan's breath hitched. Wuchen's hand was burning against his skin. The space between them was so small now. He could feel the heat radiating from Wuchen's chest through the thin silk of his robe. I am your prisoner, Xuan whispered, a desperate reminder to himself as much as to Wuchen. Are you? Wuchen's voice was barely a breath. His eyes dropped to Xuan's lips. Because right now, Lin Xuan, I feel like the one in chains. Xuan's eyes widened. Before he could process the confession, Wuchen's hand slid to the back of Xuan's neck, his fingers tangling in the dark, loose hair. He pulled Xuan closer, just a fraction of an inch. Their foreheads almost touched. The tension between them was a physical weight, thick with unspoken desire, forbidden longing, and a terrifying vulnerability. Xuan's hands instinctively came up, resting flat against Wuchen's chest. He could feel Wuchen's heart beating. It was racing. The cold Jade Prince was trembling. Xuan tilted his head up. He was drowning in Wuchen's eyes. He wanted to close the distance. He wanted to feel those lips against his. But before the moment could shatter into something permanent, a heavy bell tolled in the distance. The palace watch was changing. The sound broke the spell. Wuchen closed his eyes, a look of profound pain crossing his face. He slowly released Xuan's hair and took a step back, putting distance between them like it physically hurt him to do so. Go back to your pavilion, Xuan, Wuchen said quietly, his voice tight. Before I forget who I am supposed to be. Xuan stood there for a second, his skin tingling where Wuchen had touched him, his heart pounding in his throat. Without a word, he turned and fled into the night, the memory of Wuchen's touch burning a hole straight through his chest. Things changed after that night in the library. They couldn't avoid each other, but when they were together, the air was unbearably thick. There were lingering glances across crowded courtyards, accidental brushes of shoulders in the hallways. When Wuchen spoke to Xuan, his voice was softer, and when Xuan looked at Wuchen, he no longer saw an enemy prince. He saw a man trapped by his own crown. But in the imperial palace, happiness is a luxury no one can afford. Spring arrived, bringing with it a devastating royal decree. The emperor, Wuchen's father, was growing ill. To secure the empire's future, the emperor decreed that Crown Prince Wuchen must immediately take a crown princess. He had chosen the daughter of a powerful northern general. The news swept through the palace like wildfire. When Lin Xuan heard it, he was standing in the courtyard feeding the koi fish. The servant who whispered the gossip didn't notice the way Xuan's hand froze midair. He didn't notice the way the color completely drained from Xuan's face. It felt like someone had driven a dagger into his ribs and twisted it. He is going to be married. Of course he was. He was the crown prince. He was going to be the emperor. What did Xuan expect? That Wuchen would abandon his duty for a male hostage from a ruined kingdom? It was a foolish, impossible dream. That night, it rained again. A violent spring thunderstorm. Xuan sat on the floor of his bedroom, drinking cheap rice wine straight from the jar, trying to drown the suffocating ache in his chest. The windows rattled with the thunder. The room was dark. Suddenly, the doors to his pavilion were thrown open. Xuan jumped to his feet, grabbing the dagger he always kept hidden under his bed. A figure stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone, silhouetted by the lightning. It was Wuchen. He had no guards, no umbrella. He was breathing heavily, his dark hair plastered to his face, his silk robes dripping onto the floorboards. He stepped into the room and slammed the doors shut behind him. What are you doing here? Xuan demanded, his voice shaking. You shouldn't be here. It's the middle of the night. Wuchen didn't answer right away. He just walked toward Xuan, his eyes wild, desperate. He looked nothing like the composed heir to the empire. He looked like a man who was starving. I heard you didn't eat today, Wuchen said, his voice rough. I heard you refuse to leave your pavilion. My appetite is my own business, Your Highness, Xuan snapped, trying to step back, trying to put up his walls. Shouldn't you be preparing for your wedding? I hear the Northern General's daughter is very beautiful. The sarcasm was a defense mechanism, but it acted like a match to a powder keg. Wuchen closed the distance between them in 2 massive strides. He grabbed Xuan by the lapels of his robes and shoved him backward until Xuan's back hit the mahogany wall with a thud. Xuan gasped, the dagger falling from his hand and clattering to the floor. Wuchen pinned him there, his body pressing heavily against Xuan's, dripping cold rainwater, but burning with heat. Do not speak to me of her, Wuchen snarled, his face inches from Xuan's, his breath smelling faintly of liquor. Do you think I want this? Do you think I care about the North, or the court, or the damn throne? You are the Crown Prince! Xuan yelled back, his own emotions finally snapping. He shoved at Wuchen's chest, but Wuchen didn't budge. It is your duty. You have the world at your feet, Yan Wuchen. Why do you keep coming here? Why do you keep tormenting me? Because I can't stay away from you. Wuchen yelled, his voice breaking with a raw, agonizing desperation. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm outside. Wuchen's chest heaved against Xuan's. His eyes were wide, filled with a vulnerability that tore Xuan's heart to pieces. I tried, Wuchen whispered, his voice trembling. He pressed his forehead against Xuan's shoulder, burying his face in the crook of Xuan's neck. His hands gripped Xuan's robes like a drowning man holding onto a lifeline. I tried to hate you. I tried to ignore you. But everywhere I go, I see your face. When they talk to me of marriage, I feel sick, because the only person I want beside me is you. Xuan stopped struggling. His breath hitched. The feel of Wuchen, the invincible Crown Prince, shaking in his arms, broke every defense he had left. Slowly, hesitantly, Xuan lifted his arms. He wrapped them around Wuchen's broad shoulders, pulling him closer, burying his hands in Wuchen's wet hair. Wuchen let out a choked breath at the touch. He lifted his head. Their eyes met in the dark, completely unguarded. All the politics, the war, the kingdoms, it all vanished. There was only the heat between them, the frantic beating of their hearts, and the terrifying realization that they were completely, hopelessly ruined for anyone else. Wuchen's gaze dropped to Xuan's lips. This time, he didn't pull away. He leaned in. Xuan closed his eyes, his heart exploding as he felt Wuchen's breath ghost across his lips. Bang. A sudden, violent explosion shook the very foundation of the palace. The floor violently shuddered. Wuchen and Xuan broke apart, stumbling. Through the paper windows, the sky outside turned a bright, horrifying orange. The alarms began to sound, the deep, frantic ringing of the massive bronze bells in the central watchtower. What is that? Xuan asked, panic rising. Wuchen's romantic desperation vanished instantly, replaced by the deadly, sharp instincts of a royal heir. He rushed to the window and threw it open. Flames were rising from the inner palace, the emperor's sleeping quarters. Treason, Wuchen said, his voice turning to ice. My uncle, the second prince, he moved his troops tonight. Wuchen turned back to Xuan. They will kill my father, and then they will come for me, and if you are with me, they will kill you too. Wuchen grabbed his sword from his waist. He looked at Xuan, his eyes fierce. Run, Xuan. Take a horse from the eastern stables. In this chaos, you can escape. Go back to your people. Xuan stared at the open door, the path to his freedom suddenly clear. He could leave. He could run away from this golden cage, away from the politics, away from the man who had conquered his home. He looked at Wuchen, who was already turning toward the burning palace, preparing to walk into a slaughter to defend his throne. Xuan bent down. He picked up his dagger from the floor. Then, he walked over to the weapon rack by the door and pulled down a real, steel, double-edged longsword. Wuchen turned around, his eyes widening as Xuan stepped up beside him, the sword gleaming in his hand. You think your footwork is good enough to survive without me, Your Highness? Xuan asked, a small, defiant smile on his face. Wuchen stared at him. You could be free. I am already exactly where I want to be, Xuan replied quietly. Wuchen's breath hitched. He reached out and grabbed Xuan's hand, lacing their fingers together, gripping him tight for one brief, intense second. Then we fight together, Wuchen said. They burst out of the pavilion into the chaotic, burning night. The palace was a war zone. Rebel soldiers in red armor were swarming the courtyards, clashing with the imperial guards. Blood stained the white marble. Wuchen and Xuan moved like a singular, deadly storm. They had sparred so many times in that bamboo courtyard that they knew each other's movements perfectly. Where Wuchen struck heavy, Xuan moved fast. When a rebel soldier swung at Wuchen's blind spot, Xuan's blade was already there, parrying the blow and striking back. They fought back to back, a terrifying dance of black and white silk, steel, and blood. They fought their way up the thousands of steps to the main throne room. Wuchen was a demon with a blade, fueled by fury, but there were too many. A rebel archer on a balcony took aim at the Crown Prince. Xuan saw it out of the corner of his eye. "Wuchen!" Xuan screamed. He didn't think. He threw himself in front of Wuchen just as the bowstring snapped. The arrow tore through the air and buried itself deep into Xuan's shoulder. Xuan let out a choked gasp, stumbling backward, the force of the arrow knocking him off his feet. "Xuan!" Wuchen roared. The sound tore from his throat like a wounded animal. Wuchen threw his sword like a javelin. It impaled the archer on the balcony instantly. Ignoring the rest of the battle, Wuchen dropped to his knees, catching Xuan before he hit the stone floor. "No, no, no!" Wuchen panicked, his hands shaking violently as he pressed against the wound. Blood was seeping through Xuan's white robes, staining them crimson. "Stay with me." "Xuan, look at me!" Xuan coughed, his face pale, but he managed a weak smile. "I told you, your footwork was sloppy. You left your left side open." "You idiot!" Wuchen choked out, tears finally breaking through his icy facade, mixing with the rain and ash on his face. "You beautiful, stubborn idiot. Why did you do that?" "Because," Xuan whispered, reaching up with a trembling blood-stained hand to touch Wuchen's cheek. "You protected me." Before Wuchen could respond, the massive doors of the throne room burst open. The Imperial Army's reinforcements, led by the loyal northern general, flooded the courtyard. The rebellion was crushed in minutes. The second prince was dragged out in chains. The battle was over. Wuchen had won. But as the courtyard filled with cheering soldiers, Wuchen didn't care about the throne. He picked Lin Xuan up in his arms, screaming for the royal physicians, clutching the enemy prince to his chest, as if letting go would mean the end of the world. A month passed. The old emperor had died of shock during the rebellion. Yan Wuchen was crowned the new emperor of the Great Yan dynasty. His first act as emperor was to pardon the captured rebel soldiers. His second act was to break the engagement with the northern general's daughter, citing mourning for his father. But the court was waiting for his third act. What would he do with Lin Xuan? The hostage prince had survived the arrow. He was recovering in a lavish, private wing of the imperial palace, heavily guarded. But this time, the guards were not there to keep him in. They were there to keep assassins out. The nobles demanded Xuan be sent away. They whispered that the new emperor was too attached to an enemy. On the day of Wuchen's first official court assembly, the tension was unbearable. Hundreds of ministers knelt on the marble floor of the great hall. Wuchen sat on the golden dragon throne. He wore the heavy imperial robes, a crown of gold and jade resting on his head. He looked every inch a terrifying divine ruler. "Bring him in," Wuchen ordered, his voice echoing in the massive hall. The heavy doors opened. Lin Xuan walked in. He was not wearing the simple clothes of a prisoner. He was dressed in deep crimson and gold, the colors of high nobility. His hair was elegantly styled. He walked with a perfect proud spine, though he favored his injured shoulder slightly. The ministers murmured in outrage, but one cold glare from the emperor silenced them all. Xuan stopped at the base of the steps. He looked up at Wuchen. "Lin Xuan of Zhao," Wuchen's voice boomed. "You shed your own blood to protect the crown during the rebellion. Your loyalty has proven greater than those born within my own borders." Wuchen stood up. He walked down the steps, the heavy silk of his robes whispering against the stone. He stopped right in front of Xuan. From this day forward, Wuchen declared loudly for the entire court to hear, "The kingdom of Zhao is no longer a defeated territory. It is a sovereign ally, and Prince Lin Xuan is hereby appointed the Grand Commander of the Imperial Vanguard. He answers to no one, only to me." The court erupted in shocked gasps. Commander of the Vanguard? He was giving an enemy prince control of the military? It was madness. It was unheard of. But no one dared to speak against the cold Jade Emperor. Wuchen stepped closer to Xuan. To the court, it looked like a formal military swearing-in, but between them, in the space only they shared, the energy was electric. Wuchen leaned down, supposedly to hand Xuan the Jade Tiger tally that commanded the army, but as he pressed the jade into Xuan's hand, Wuchen's fingers lingered, tracing the pulse on Xuan's wrist. "I told you," Wuchen murmured softly, so only Xuan could hear, a deeply possessive smirk touching his lips. "You belong with me." Xuan looked up at him. The hatred was gone. The fear was gone. He curled his fingers around the jade, and around Wuchen's hand, squeezing back. "I answer only to you, your majesty," Xuan whispered back, a teasing, daring light in his eyes. "But we will see who gives the orders behind closed doors." Wuchen's breath hitched, his eyes darkening with a promise of exactly what was going to happen when those doors finally closed. He turned back to the court, his face impassive, but his heart racing with a triumphant, fiery joy. The golden cage was gone. In its place, an empire they would rule together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Now, we all know what happens when the Emperor and his new commander finally retreat to their private chambers. The tension they have been holding onto for months is ready to snap, and the slow burn is about to burst into absolute flames. If you want the next part, the completely uncensored 18+ continuation of this night, and more unlimited, deeply passionate Ancient Royal BL stories, come join Spicy Ancient BL on Patreon. You know YouTube won't let us show you the real heat, so the true ending, where Wuchen finally takes Xuan apart and shows him just how much he's been holding back, is waiting for you right now. The link is waiting for you in the description and the pinned comment. See you there, and until next time, keep dreaming.